Hey, Satanico here once again for God Loves Comics, and this is at last the grand finale and the Grand Guignol of Alan Moore's Miracleman with John Totleben. And you can see this is a John Totleben cover from 2003. I think an adjustment from Marvel because this is definitely not the original cover, which was absolutely horrific. And we will see that in the interior, but here you have this new cover. If 2003 is new. And you see once again the original writer, which is Alan Moore, and art by John Totleben. And it's taken me a little while to get to this, and I'm just going to credit it to COVID malaise. But I would say that this is probably a perfect time to finish reading this piece, as the world is really on fire, it seems, in a lot of ways. And this is Alan Moore's version of the apocalypse, albeit in the 1980s, but yeah. And because it's so horrific and I know what's coming, I think that added to my trepidation. But let's get it over with and hopefully enjoyable. Some nights are busy brimming with new stars to find and name, or desert waste to irrigate. Some nights are quiet. Yesterday, I genetically reintroduced tame mastodons to London's parks. Today has been comparatively dull. I hate the silences. Well, as he's hating the silences, this is Mike Moran, who is now just a permanently Miracleman. He basically buried Mike Moran's last will and testament or whatever under some rocks at the top of a mountain after his wife has left for a hiatus, and his daughter is a very special creature herself. She's only a baby, but she's incredibly precocious, and so he is basically just given in and become Miracleman permanently. But as he's saying the silences in which he's creating this utopia, you see the absolute horrors the Kid Miracleman is already wreaking upon London. Looks like a 3-person family, just their skins hung on the clothesline, crushed bicycle, some holes in the house. So, noise is my only answer to today. Whenever clamor and activity subside, I feel the riptides of the past sucking the present's sands from out beneath my feet, between my toes. It tugs me out and takes me back, and I remember. And then again, people actually just pierced on sharp spires from Big Ben, the Tower of London. Horrific, just skewered. I remember, were I someone else, I'd wish to God that I did not. But being God, I have none to whom I might address such pleas. Omnipotent, I can thus turn to no one, cannot share my guilt or shame. The buck stops here. Well, obviously there is someone who shares his powers for evil, for malevolence, and as we can see. Beyond the moon, still taken by the novelty of others like ourselves, we were young gods at play above a world that never dreamed of us. A world that needed never have the slightest hint of terrible new creatures in its midst. I still recall the moment. Avril pointing to the braid of smoke twisting between the small imaginary spires of London, reconstructed there upon the warpsmith's simultaneous hologram facsimile of the earth. A bomb, a burning subway. Surely nothing worse. Surely the great majority went on as usual with their lives. Not hardly. Kneeling on Surrey, bending low, peering past rooftops thatched with light down the bonsai streets below, we saw their hell in zero gauge, saw horror and red death abroad. Upon a normal afternoon, saw there our Götterdämmerung, our Ragnarok, our end. Miracleman, Book 3, Chapter 5, Nemesis. As you can see, dressed relatively benignly, suit and tie. A black vest, white shirt, and black tie. And then just decapitated heads all around him, just stacked. Babies, old people, young people, men, women, children. Really doesn't matter. The whole city's on fire. Cars are crushed. Just things are just completely obliterated. And just his dead eyes looking forward to more damage. No remorse. What use concealment with the age of gods begun without us? Imagine that omniscient, yet taken by surprise. Oh, we recovered soon enough. We're flashed to London in less time than London takes to read. But he'd been there for hours. Just imagine. Those hours that he had crammed with centuries of human suffering. Those narrow side streets filled with miles of pain. Having exhausted all the humdrum cruelties known to man, however, quite early in the afternoon, he had progressed to innovations unmistakably his own. You see this small interior panel where the alien beings who are also trying to stop him are in the background, and he's carrying this severed hand. And then you see just skewered heads again. London Bridge is falling down indeed. Looks more like hell, obviously. It looks like molten lava more than the Thames. Of course, I later realized he'd been waiting there for me. While unaware, I frolicked on the satellite. Just waiting. Waiting there for hours and killing people while he waited. At last. Really, what must one do to get attention round here? And then we fought. Given the speed of thought and motion shared by all the combatants, that opening skirmish took but seconds. Seconds that erased the landmarks of 200 years, that blew the past away, and launched mythologies that shall endure until the sun grows red and overripe and cold. He just attacked, not asking who the others were. I wondered if he'd even ever woken from Gargunza's dreams. If he believed those senseless fantasies were true, why not as well accept a warpsmith, caring little whence it came, and less what it could do? The Bank of England's massive debt and credit could not contain him, not at all. Erupting in a waterspout of Krugerrands, he showered in blood and gold, while 1,000 fluttering notes from the Queen looked on, as ever, unperturbed. Miraclewoman was the first to move upon him, bright blue lightning striking through the settling ochre dust. He recognized her, said that he had remembered her from when he had been a child, expressed surprise she was alive, suggested novel ways to remedy that fact. In fairness of the two, she was more graceful and controlled, more skilled and more intelligent in her attack, her moves more subtle and precise. Judged in those terms, I'd say she won. But only judged in those terms. He grabs her by the throat as fast as she's moving and just punches her away, as we see everyone sort of looking on in shock. So there was no pause and no respite. He leapt for Asa Chorn, fast as a cheetah, as a mamba, as an ink-black thunderbolt. Yet when they brag amongst themselves, the cats and snakes and sheets of lightning use one ultimate comparison, albeit sparingly, fast as a warpsmith. Poor Marble Arch, who could afford no more restraint than could the Bank of England. Would that Asa Chorn had teleported Bates somewhere and not removed so charming and preposterous a folly from our skyline. But then he could not have known, not being raised around these parts. It didn't hold him. Now it's up to me. No, let the Fire Drake buy us time. I must locate a means by which to purchase extra power. It will require a trip to Hod, my home world, galaxies away. What? But, there. It is arranged. Like Alan Moore's none too subtle critique of classic London architecture in the midst of all this. Who's next? I want more flying tarts and conjurers to kill before I make that big blonde fairy eat his heart. I know. I haven't killed you all. Didn't I see an... earlier? I think there was a racial epithet in there that they deleted, of course. Actually, we prefer the term black person. Burn houses, automobiles, gas main pipes. So, Kid Miracleman, made a racial term and then turned and set him ablaze. And it burned his clothes off, but it did not harm him. Nah, you don't got it yet. See, I ain't into getting burned. Hell no. Am into burning. Man, I burn all kinds of shit. I saw him at the Firestorm's heart. His business suit reduced to ash. The costume underneath, Chad, he removed it. Had he ever removed it? Had it grown with him? Was not the yellow I remembered, but a flat and lightless black. I heard his awful roar. Then Asa Chorn led me away to search of greater power. The battle, far too big to be contained by simple facts, had spawned so many different legends, each with its own adherents, as valid, if not more so, as the truth. Apocrypha, imaginary tales. The library at Olympus has 1,000 such upon its shelves. And one such story, true or false, who knows? We are transported by the warpsmith's power to silence. On the seabed, where he's magically arranged equipment borrowed from his awesome race that will transmit a living thing through time. Propelled hence the past, our object is to harness energies released by clashing with my earlier selves. Thus, back in 1963, above the Arctic Circle, I confront the Miracleman family upon their way, unknowingly to face atomic death. Oh, how ingenious, how baroque these myths become. The theologians who support this version are called trans-time integrationists. To them, the tale's symbolic of the way in which to overcome adversity. One must first face and overcome one's past. The same tradition in a later episode has me in 1982 upon Earth's moon, in conflict with myself after my glorious resurrection. Moon dust, see how history turns to moon dust in their hands. The witnesses of the conspiracy conversely hold that we obtained our victory by selling Earth into the thrall of aliens who plan to wipe away our culture with the flood of dangerous new ideas that spilled from their inhuman minds. Who is to say? They may be right. For my part, I prefer the Gnostic faiths, such as the Knights of Warpsmith Resurrected, who in symbol-laden gospels tell how I play chess with baits for Earth atop a mountain of the dead, and Asa Chorn, when I've lost every piece save one, tears out his heart and cries, "Here, play with this instead." That may be the most fanciful and also somewhat familiar. The rational brethren, after thorough research, have more plausibly suggested that our enemy went mad, confronted by the truth concerning his fictitious past. A mystic offshoot from this sect believes the world within Gargonza's dream machines is real, with this life but illusory. They have a point, but best of all, the Church of Deicide relates how we approached the old sick gods of Earth and murdered them to steal their power. They tell of Shiva, quite disarmed. I think that's a joke. Of Gabriel's blazing sword snapped in two across my knee. The church has only 19 worshippers. I send them small donations under different names. So effectively, Alan Moore has given us multiple religious theories. It's kind of a choose your own adventure as to what you choose to believe out of this. When some kind of cataclysmic event he's suggesting throughout human history has occurred, it will inevitably be distorted by all sorts of things, from superstition and myth to all manner of nefarious and corrupt motivations and whatever. And he's always had a fascination with religion that I think was really played out in Promethea, but you can already see it here. And this is a beautifully illustrated page, by the way. The colors are fantastic. Where most of these conflicting heresies agree is in the final outcome of the tale. So this is the closest to the truth. With energy obtained, whether by deicide, travel in time, or treachery, we both at last returned to silence, hoping we'd have time to use the power we gained, hoping in vain. He was amongst us, snorting, stamping. There was nothing sane in his incinerator eyes. He was Ahriman. He was Loki. He was Lucifer and Set. He was the bad god, cast in awful flesh. We'd had no time to draw up pentacles or work our charms. But through one closing eye, half pulverized, I glimpsed the warpsmith as he scratched a hasty sigil in the air that would release the gathered forces harnessed there. There was what I can only call the absence of a flash, and then the low beginnings of a monstrous noise. The end of silence. At the ocean's deepest point, the pressure was unmeasurable, and Asa Chorn threw up a shield about us both that held until he'd move all the combatants elsewhere. Again, I wish elsewhere had not meant London. Call it sentiment, but I still miss those huddled buildings, muddled centuries, and styles. The truth is, Asa Chorn knew very few locations on this earth, and felt a bond of love to none of them. How strange, then, that he gave his life away for us. The explosion, the subsea pressures, have distressed him. Strike before he rises. Bastards, bastards, eat you, eat your cities, eat your children, eating life, shitting skulls. At that point, Miracleman just crushes down on his head. But that's not enough, and they go through subway, the metro, in front of a train that's actually still moving. And the fight continues as people run for their lives. There were so many vehicles all trying to get out of London. My apologists have claimed the car that I first hurled at Bates was empty, those who had been inside having all previously escaped. I'm sorry, but that isn't true. Typical. Whenever you're losing, you start to throw the toys around. Well, two can play at that game. Johnny, listen. You're dooming yourself. What happens when you run out of things to destroy? It's just emptiness. For you, Johnny, empty cruelty, empty life. Look at what you've done to yourself, to everything around you. You've taken something marvelous and turned it into sewage. God forgive you. Burn in hell. Yeah, I don't think that speech is going to stop him. And I did. Threw a petrol truck at him. You can see the horrified driver on the right side of the car, because it is Britain. Obviously, who's killed. Drenched by petrol, I took on a flickering second skin of liquid fire, so that I could not see for flames, but only heard his voice as laughter. When he laughed, he'd sound his age, which was 13. While I bathed in raw flame, the wordsmith, waiting through cold logic, had arrived at a solution to our plight. We'd dropped a bank on him. He'd been unharmed. We'd warped him into stone. He'd broken out. Unlike the Keese, whom Asa Chorn had fought before, these Terran variants did not rely upon a range of bodies with tough skin, but seemingly upon a force field. One did not throw banks at force fields, when a pebble might suffice, if it were placed inside. Grotesquely, he still lived, each of his more than human cells gripped by horrid urge to cling fast and survive. He lived, he roared, and as the warpsmith reached for further missiles to embed within our enemy, he struck mortally. And the warpsmith's eyes, gone somewhere cold, somewhere beyond the pain, faced death like some albino samurai, and insolently stared it down for just one long, vital instant longer. For just one vital instant longer. Oh, shit! Even for him, the pain must have been quite beyond imagining. We do feel pain. Things such as we, and when pain comes, we have no place to hide from it, save one. The rush of air from the explosion tore the cloak of flames from my back, and as its echoes died, I peered through the smoke and ash to see what lingered at the center of the blast. A small thing shivering and alone. Johnny. I did it. Again, didn't I? He got out. Bad Johnny got out. I can't keep him in. I'm not strong enough. He'll just keep getting out. He'll just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Shh. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It's not. It's never going to be all right. Listen, I promise you, you'll never have to suffer through that again. Kid Miracleman won't be coming back. You really mean that? You've discovered some new way to stop me changing into him? Ah, yes. Yes, I have. Oh, thank you. Thank you. You don't know. I've never been so happy. Thank you. Thank you. That's okay. It's okay. Good kid, Johnny. Good kid. So you could see that coming. There was no way he could stop it. So I thought he broke his neck, but you see by the splatter of blood on his burnt face that he just crushed his skull. And Johnny was bullied. He was bullied externally by actual kids and internally by Kid Miracleman, and he was Miracleman's young sidekick, so he certainly never wanted to do it, and you can see the agony. And bizarrely enough, Johnny doesn't have any pants on because he was being molested at the time that he finally summoned Kid Miracleman. So that's pretty amazing they remembered to add that detail. I held him till the shuddering stopped, and then till he grew cold. Off in the distance, sirens circled us like carrion birds, their modulated shrieks ringing across the wastelands through the rain. I thought about the firemen and the dumbstruck ambulance crews. The world in which they tried to sleep that night would be a different world to that in which they had begun their day. Different forever. All the cats were now out of the bag, the worms at last freed from their tin. And you see these fragmented, fractured panels kind of emulating the fragmented, fractured world. Just destruction in every corner of London, and death. And this, which is Alan Moore and John Tolibin's Bruegel, but maybe even more horrific in its own way. I knew in all the world, that there existed no can large enough for us to ever cram them all back in. No can large enough for us to ever cram them all back in. Kind of awkwardly phrased, but yeah. It's a woman with her eyes gouged out, her arms torn off, with her children clinging to her, people skewered everywhere. These two heads, I mean, almost comedic in a sense, but you can almost see like a Graham Ghastly Ingalls drawing this panel. That was 2 years ago. The worms surprised us all by turning into butterflies. And yet, though, from the devastated streets there rose in time an edifice that was no less than Albion, than Camelot, fulfilled. We still retain these killing fields. We have not turned them into hushed memorial parks, drawing a veil of quiet discretion over bloody fact. Here there are coral reefs of baby skulls, and worse, much worse. These charnel pastures serve as a reminder, a memento mori, never letting us forget that though Olympus pierced the very skies and all the history of the earth, there's never been a heaven, never been a house of gods that was not built on human bones. A coral reef of baby skulls, and worse. So, the final moral here of this issue is, that utopia Even if you see Utopia, even if you see the Grand Empire, the glowing spires, a lot of death and siege and torment preceded it. The page 3 splash artwork from John Tolibin. And there is the original Miracleman cover. The original art and the original cover that I guess was too graphic for Marvel. Famously clutching a head. And see some of the pierced bodies in the background. And there it is in color. And also the horrific original art page. One. Which he signed to Rich. Best John Tolibin. If I were Rich, I don't think I would want to own this page. It's just too dark. And more original art. So we're going to skip ahead. There is that horrific scene. And at last, some light at the end of the tunnel. And this is it. Miracleman number 16. This is Alan Moore's curtain call on this series. Neil Gaiman picked it up after this. And let's enlarge this so I can actually read it. It's been 5 years since my rebirth. Though I'd suspected that the people would in some way mark the anniversary, I'd hoped rather uncharitably that they would not see fit to sacrifice small goats or children in my name. As it transpired, I was quite touched. They made a bonfire on the wasteland that was once Trafalgar Square, and on it heaped their comic books, their films and novels filled with horror, science fiction, fantasy, and as it burned, they cheered as the curling, burning pages fluttered up into the night, cheered to be done with times when wonder was a sad and wretched thing made only out of paper, out of celluloid. So in Alan Moore's view, you no longer need science fiction, you no longer need fantasy, because it genuinely exists. And so it's eliminated it, essentially eliminated comic books in general, or at least the mainstream comics. Quote, a telex came from Tokyo this morning. Their geneticists have reared a mouse that levitates, a glowing rabbit that can talk. Oh, what a world with super mice and atom rabbits. Yet I dream of more. And of course, that's somewhat a play on comics as well, super mice and atom rabbits. I dream suburbias, where every child is brave and funny, where a green-skinned scientist cackling at the dusk, or a journey to the sherbet waste of Mars are childhood commonplaces. I dream teenagers, the boys with leather sweatshirts, girls with single brushstroke brows, and endless ice cream parlors, never growing old or running out of flavors. Dream them in a moon-chilled jalopies when their sitcom day is through. Their delicate perfume of sex and leatherette pervades the air. The radios playing new Gene Vincent songs, new episodes of discontinued but beloved shows. I dream a world of heroes in excited clothes, hoods cut away from the show, hoods cut away to show the hair, or leotards made out of flags. I dream insignia, dream lightning flashes, planets, letter stars, of bob-cut women wearing red stilettos, ice blue half-length capes of men in dominoes, transparent blouses, slashing elegance of the line in every wrinkle, every crease. I dream names like Dr. Satellite, Lady October, Johnny Analog, a.k.a. sounds early Watchmen. I dream a world where everyone has sidekicks and caves to keep their eerie souvenirs. I dream of cities that old futurists would weep with joy to see, of wharfside neighborhoods where tough kids track down spies, where crumbling tenements contort to teetering and eccentric shapes that seem to spell out worlds against the night. I dream of Piccadilly Circus where magicians dressed in toppers, tails, or turbans wave hypnotically and conjure birds made out of steam or scented fish or flowers that speak in a verse for the delighted evening crowds. I dream of an embankment where tall men with somber cloaks and names like Kismet, Destiny, or Fate will entertain a passerby with stories of her life to come or chill her blood with supernatural parables, and all the while their hat-brimmed shadow hides their eyes. I dream of rugged, mustard yellow monsters from the deep with vulgar and percussive names like Zax and Rula Room, i.e. Stanley and Jack Kirby monsters. I dream a world of dreams, fulfilled, a place where ecstasy and not his brother pain has run amok. And even as I dream, I know my dreams are almost true, a planet of attained desire and concrete fantasy that spins and glitters, balanced on the diamond capstone of Olympus. Well, that was very much Alan Moore's dream, even though I suppose it's supposed to be Miracleman's. I don't know if Miracleman is quite that imaginative or articulate, but he is a god, so we'll give him that latitude. And by the way, going back, let's go back one page. You can see him lounging there, dreaming in his new utopian metropolis, hanging in the sky. The capstone hollow forms a dappled crystal room where later we'll observe the anniversary ourselves. Till then, I waste an afternoon amidst my orchard of tall screens, watch tapes of the Gargunza crafted dreams that are my 50s memories. Profundities aside, I quite enjoyed Invaders from the Future. What a notion, and how true. Futurity invades our here and now, erecting beachheads in our language and our architecture, till at last we're under occupation and tomorrow's coups depose the rule of history. Quite naturally, the world went into shock. Most of its cities witnessed riots by those whose need for protest had no target that was comprehensible, whose urge to flee had no coherent destination. Stunned religious leaders worsened the hysteria, and as for Earth's political response, we later learned that Russia had come very close to launching a preemptive nuclear strike against Great Britain, hoping to eradicate the superhuman threats before it came to menace them. Yet on this anniversary, tomorrow must defer to memory. Somewhere above, a diamond room awaits. Remembering, I ascend. And going back to the previous one, preemptive nuclear strike, Russia attempted it, and so had America. So had Red China, France, and Israel. I'm reading these completely out of order because it is, I would say, even for someone who's not a comics novice, if you're just reading them on the fly, it's easy to think that you should read left to right, but instead I should have read straight down, knowing better. But this page layout does not exactly guide the eye. These tapes, commercially available, seem popular. Miracle Woman's More Than Mine. There are mystery plays. Men read allegories into these childish tales. Read revelations into every line. And comics, of course. The Bates Affair, with 40,000 dead and half of London simply gone, exposed us to the world, and we planned how to deal with Earth overtly. Having no chance now of working secretly, we sent an introductory message through the British government, granting an audience at which we would explain our situation and their own. The reason they eventually chose not to do so, meaning America, Russia, China, France, Israel, had chose not to launch preemptive nuclear strikes on Britain, the reason they eventually chose not to do so was not based on morality, but rather on the burgeoning conviction that such measures simply would not work. In this, they were correct. I don't know if a nuke could harm me now, but with the warpsmiths at my side, it seemed unlikely I need ever learn. So while a frightened world procrastinated, we made plans and licked our wounds and mourned our dead, including one of the warpsmiths. The cluster mates of Azad Chorn came to his funeral. Behind the moon, Lans Evo, Uju Shil, Rin Luli, Kana Blur, replacing Azad Chorn on Earth. Big sexual. It says big sexual, not bisexual. Warpsmith clusters have 3 males, 3 females, marriages designed like hexagons, deaths mourned by melancholy orgies. This is surely Alan Moore's personal fantasy. Huey, Avril, and myself, as friends, were asked to stay and watch. Half from politeness we accepted. Only half. Half from curiosity. Despite hairless pudenda, hairless underarms, both genders have spreading fern of curls around their spinal base, the men with tufts about their areoles. Ushu Chill embraced Rin Luli, who warped into union with Kana Blur. Fan Muda and Lans Evo kissed. Then one turned into Uzu Chill. The others seemed to divide into an upper and lower half, each wrapped around a different lover at a different point in space. Beyond that, things became a turbulent, erotic vortex, flesh in orbit, a magnetic field of kisses too chaotic to record. I've never witnessed anything so sensual or so sad, affirming life while accepting death's totality. Aroused, shifting, self-consciously, I gradually became aware of Avril watching me. I met her eyes and I wanted her. Then shivering, looked away. The funeral concluded. We returned to Earth. Nothing was said. Then came our meeting with the government. They all seemed nervous. No one spoke or met our eyes until I launched into a brief description of our plans. After that, the world economy must be reconstructed, broken down into more manageable units. No, this is all quite preposterous. We can never allow this kind of interference with the market. Allow. As I was saying, this destructuring of the economy must only be seen as an interim measure. Moving on from that. Afterwards, I was surprised by Avril's anger. Michael, that was childish and spiteful. There was no need to humiliate her. We're supposed to be above that. Prime Minister, I know this must have been a dreadful shock. If you need someone to talk to, please get in touch. Yes. Thank you. I will, Sissel. Can we go now, please? The way she hung on to the minister beside her, voice too choked to speak, her eyes so dazed, walking away, she looked so old, so suddenly. I could not hate her. Of course, that's his Margaret Thatcher, I'm fairly certain. He addressed the potential of British fascism in V for Vendetta. And in this way, he's just, as much as Alan Moore hated Margaret Thatcher, and most Labour Party liberals in Britain hated Margaret Thatcher, he's just making her completely powerless and irrelevant in this context. And so she's just reduced to a withering, old, powerless woman who they can no longer feel anger against, only pity. 2 days later, Fan Muda and I addressed the United Nations, including a sizable emergency delegation from the Warsaw Pact, which is Russia's answer to NATO, their own conglomeration of supporting nations that have no choice really, given Russia forces them to support the Warsaw Pact. In conclusion, then, I must inform you that your chemical, biological, and nuclear stockpiles are completely disorganized. Disorganized? We may be having some language difficulties here. Does a young lady mean that our defenses are disorganized on a political level? No. On a molecular level. We teleported them into the sun 15 minutes ago. No, but seriously, while we appreciate your attempts to interject levity into somewhat tense proceedings, this is a very real issue. Les armes nucléaires tombantes dans le soleil. Furthermore, if we are to... Excuse me. Hello? Yes? What? They've what? Kilonue? But they can't have. Well, did you look everywhere? Oui. Qu'est-ce? C'est pardon? Ja. Was Fräulein? Alarm? Was? Jesus Christ! Yes, I'll be right there. C'est impossible. Pourquoi me prenez-vous? Struggling. I'm doing my best. I'm sorry. Nein. Das ist unglaublich. Let me through, for God's sake. Oh, mon Dieu, laissez passer. Later, astronomers announced a tiny flare upon the sun's perimeter. In nuclear terms, the sun is an unshielded giant reactor, several million times as big as Earth itself. I don't suppose it even noticed. Yeah. The point there being, first of all, they should be delighted, they've eliminated all the potential for a nuclear conflict from everyone. So everyone's equal. But, and additionally, for all those nuclear weapons that could completely destroy the Earth hundreds of times over, they just sent it into the sun and it barely created a flicker. That's how insignificant the weapons are, humans are, Earth is, in the grand scheme of things. But the Earth noticed. What are these? Verbal warheads, I suppose. They're all Earth has left to launch at us. I guess negative letters. The conservative media seem to think that the world has fallen into the hands of super liberals. Meanwhile, the liberal press says we're interfering with human destiny and taking away their free will. Bullshit. You see some little kid just about to drink Clorox, you're gonna take away his free will, or he ain't gonna get no destiny. I don't know, the issue of human free will is more complex than that. Michael, I don't know why you persist in seeing the state of being human as something special. Did humans ask such agonized questions about the free will of cows or the destiny of fish? Besides, we're taking nothing from them. We'll give them more free will than they've ever dreamed of or wanted. We're going to love them, Michael. We're going to make them perfect. And thus we drafted pure and abstract blueprints, free from moral complications, and were architects of dreams. Somehow, that sort of degree of control, I think, still upsets the innate individual nature of humanity. So even though you can create happiness and utopia, no one wants that forced upon them, apparently. Of course, our literal farewell to arms was but first and easiest step towards the dream's accomplishment, and each step met resistance. When the nuclear power plants, like the bombs before them, found their place within the sun, the Unions were at best unsympathetic. Even space-warped topsoil that regreened the deserted waste of Africa drew criticism, this time from extreme environmentalists who called themselves Earth Firsters. They maintained that Africa should starve and die, part of a natural balance, while insisting that the smallpox virus had its place in our ecology and ought to be reintroduced. Mostly Americans, Earth Firsters were well-fed and well-inoculated, where we ignored them and continued to repair the wounded world. So, little jabs at America everywhere you turn. Transporting ozone from a lifeless gas giant, we renewed the stratosphere and thinned the smog that trapped Earth's heat, endangering her ice caps. We need that now. These were but the simplest task included in our labors. Yet we toiled and stopped the blight, prevented the subsidence, making our foundations good, our excavations gradually uncovering the future, archaeology staged in reverse, and we were the builders of tomorrow. Still, tomorrow was not solely built with earth, air, energy, and water. There exists 5 elements. The 5th is money. Hello. Let's talk about money, for lack of it. Brazil must level precious forest, with other nations hunting precious whale meat to survive. Poor people cannot put the environment before their children's bellies. Rich nations honoring each other's empty promises assure their mutual credibility. And always, with the force of arms, we see that everyone believes. And yet, what is money? Money is a promise to redeem the cash of every bearer for its worth in gold or merchandise. An empty promise should we all demand at once redemption of our coins. We'd learn such wealth does not exist. Money's imaginary, real if we believe in it. No more. From August, everything is free. National surplus teleported to those nations most in need until they master self-sufficiency. Each soul shall have free clothing, food, and shelter, entertainment, education, all requirements for a worthwhile life, with greater luxuries for those who wish to work providing the above. Come summer, money won't exist. But then it never did. Good night. And there goes the money. From the guy who likes to burn things. And again, people are freaked out, except for the homeless people and the poor people. Once things were free, the crime rate plummeted. Encouraging this trend, we legalized all drugs while saturating Earth with honest information on their toxic or benign effects. Drug smuggling perished. Almost overnight, the drug cartels involved, their fiscal base destroyed, waged all-out war that we should perish also. Sometimes I almost miss those dark-eyed mafia princes, Guatemalan pharmacrats in their exquisite colored shirts. The planet seems so quiet without them. So I just eliminated them. And you see this sort of collage montage of murderers and drug dealers and drug violence, and culminating almost in looks like Charles Manson there, and maybe John Wayne Gacy at the very bottom, which is maybe the creepiest figure of all. Obviously, criminals still existed, but the warp smiths had some fascinating notions that assisted us with these. They had identified large proportion of compulsive criminal activity as based on physical addiction to the body's own adrenaline, providing an organic substitute, a leaf, that's juices were a natural adrenochrome. We found that crime again decreased. That left the psychopaths and brutes, the red-faced men, the ice-faced women. These were dealt with individually. Some are perhaps incurable, as many have responded well. Charles Manson runs a care group now for infants that have been abused. Though he still finds black children harder to relate to, he perceives his problem, working hard to counter it. By 1986, we had demolished Earth's last penitentiary. Thus we hewed stones, smoothing away their roughest edges, and were masons of utopia. This is Alan Moore essentially fixing all of the world's problems. Eliminate money, eliminate drugs, or make them free, which eliminates the drug cartels, all the violence, and now he's even eliminated criminal behavior, psychotic behavior. Pretty impressive. But London, what were we to do for London, half destroyed, those desolate miles where innocents died screaming that we might create the world anew? What monument could we erect that would repay their sacrifice? We razed the ruins, giving us an area of 250 square kilometers that sank our deep foundations and began to build a mountain tier by tier, triumphant soaring lines that dwarfed the gigantism of the Reichs of Berlin, a vast extravagance of decoration that would shame Versailles or Babylon the Great. For we were deities. Although we didn't know it then, the deities must have their habitat, their pearl-encrusted gates and bridges made of a rainbow. Finally it stood, 16 kilometers each side, half that in height, its pinnacle embedded in the upper atmosphere. Upon that peak we placed a massive hollow diamond we'd imported from the carbon crystal asteroids that circled Altair. Sometimes it refracts the evening sun, casting colored lights upon the swirls below, a bifrost from the 20th century. And thus we breathed mythology, spat fables, sweated legends, and were godlings of Olympus. The night of the completion we held hands, her beauty making me forget that she was real, and so I closed my eyes and felt the warmth of her body radiated, standing close to mine, and heard her vellum skin whisper against her uniform each time she'd move or shift her longingly imagined weight. And oh, the smell of her, the Earl Grey scent beneath her arms, the jungle perfume where her thighs clung momentarily together, peeled apart as she stepped closer, and with eyes still closed, I felt her glove against my cheek, felt something wet and strong push trustingly between my teeth, which in the past have chewed through steel. And then it was the first time. It was real, and I stopped turning all the things that I was feeling into words inside my head, and everything just happened. And she actually levitates and lifts him with her. And feel free to take this all in. The first tip-off that Alan Moore was going to mix his vision of eroticism in mainstream comics, which you would see to a pretty amazing effect in Swamp Thing at a later point. And they've just become almost, they've become these glistening, godlike creatures, almost chromium. Tilting buses and, I guess, emanating this incredible glow that's actually frightening some people. Mother is actually covering her son's eyes, her young son's eyes. Other people in traffic are stopping their cars, looking out the windows at this extraordinary light show in the sky. And then, in the end, they seem to splash down into this fountain. Avril was first to recognize our godhood's possibilities and dangers. First to recognize humanity's afflictions were in part born from its broken heart, resolving to become our gods of love and set that heart to rights. Flaunting celestial tradition, she rejected a theology that failed to recognize all things as gods, and to this end suggested our eugenics program, shipping frozen sperm to women who desired to rear a deity. This is getting more questionable as it goes. Soon gods shall be no more, for all are gods. Through her, the first god ever, to so love mankind that she'd decree them equally divine, surrendering her own unique divinity. Avril, I've loved you then, and you loved everyone. And they're just resting at the bottom of this. I thought it was a fountain, but with a fish and everything, maybe not. And they're just cuddling, and the crowd was watching and are now applauding. New gods. Once Avril took upon herself the aspect of fair Aphrodite, we were quick to follow suit, choosing whichever archetypal role best suited us. Our ragged fire god, Yui Moon, took charge of meeting Earth's demands for energy, creating windmill forest, coastal water wheels, converting obsolete space weaponry into reflector satellites, tapping the geothermal pulse, warming his ash-gray palms against the scalding blood of Earth. New gods, the warpsmiths, our quicksilver couriers, flickered about the globe, instructing others in the systems of our technopolitics, streamlining the communication web in which our planet hung, seizing the opportunity to view Earth's many cultures at first hand. The language that they most admired was Eskimo, with all those different words for snow. The Japanese, however, were apparently the race for which they felt the most affinity. Hence the bows. New gods, a Kees named Moors, was sent to Earth that Kees should be more fully represented. Expert in creating artificial bodies, Moors had other skills besides. For instance, people recently deceased leave faint vibrations, echoes of their personality, which could be captured and embodied in an android that enjoyed full life within the limited sustaining field that Moors erected in the basement of Olympus. It became our underworld. The last June we started bringing back the dead. Moors, you've made this place look wonderful. The grass, the mist, the hidden lighting. How far back are the personal vibrations of the dead still traceable? Could you recover, say, Einstein? No, not yet. So far, my instruments are only fine enough to register those who have died within the previous 18 months. We only just got Andy Warhol. Warhol's here. 18 of him. Of all my subjects, he seemed most delighted with an artificial body and suggested that I mass produce it. Well, that's a funny joke. I acquiesced. It seemed an interesting idea. He interviews himself or gangs up on Truman Capote in debates. The conversation here is quite sublime, and otherwise would go unheard unless we were in heaven. Your subjects like living here, then? Not necessarily, but they like living. Somewhere across the endless twilight gardens, Marvin Gaye sang, unaccompanied, "How sweet it is to be loved by you." As Moors, our Charon, ferried me across the buried artificial river back towards a place where people breathed and knew sun. Uh, Andy Warhol, of all his subjects, seemed most delighted by an artificial body because Andy Warhol was often described as very artificial externally. Of course, he wore the fright wig. He was very kind of, I don't know if blasé is the correct term, but kind of not present, supposedly. And also, of course, he liked mass producing everything, famously Campbell's soup cans. And so he was mass produced in multiple bodies. So that's kind of funny. We also had our demigods and chimerae, with Big Ben in the former category. We didn't cure him, but instead reprogrammed him with dreams designed to segue his reality with ours, at which point we'd awaken him. It wasn't difficult, since both our world and his were similarly filled with costume super beings now. Awake, he was soon perfectly adapted to the new circumstances. Feeling his costume looked rather drab next to our own, he had a new one made, assuming a new name to match his clothes. He calls himself the British Bulldog now, and has acquired a reputation truly Herculean. So a kid's ball rolls under this truck, a kid's little soccer ball, and he just shows up just to lift the truck. So the chimera was, I must confess, a whim when I learned from the Keese that it was possible to bring a body out of the underspace by using drones. I asked if they had retrieved Gargunza's monstrous dog in its mindless form and plant the canine personality of some more amiable hound. Finding the notion laughable, Miracle Woman made the beast a cap's collar, which it seemed to like. A cape and collar, I'm sorry. So that's very much finding the notion laughable. I guess a little bit of a play on Crypto, the super dog. I call it Fenris, which famous mythological dog, while the world at large refers to it as Overdog. If it has just retrieved a crippled submarine, Miracle Mutt if it should foul upon them from the sky. So, also funny. Retrieves a submarine, it's Miracle Mutt. If it takes a poop from the sky, if it retrieves a submarine, it's Overdog. If it drops from the sky, it is Miracle Mutt. Then, in the season for which he was named, my daughter found her way back home. Not 5 years old, she'd been to Algol 3 to watch the double sunrise. Saved a world near far Capella from extinction. Children grow so quickly these days. You found the Keese? They said you had their last message. Yes. They said they made a fuss of me, not having any children there. The Keese can't breed. On the other hand, they do mate a lot. They put their minds into special pleasure bodies for sex. I tried it as a sort of lobster thing. It was all right. You did what? Winter, you're only 4. Oh, Father, you're funny sometimes. What? Listen, I'm not. You've changed things on Earth, haven't you? You've redecorated it. Redecorated. Oh, well, yes. We've pretty much redesigned human society and built a new world. Do you like it? Do you like it? You decided to leave the sky that color, did you? I guess she's critical. Despite initial reservations with regard to decor, Winter soon took a useful role within our new society. The first new super babies, fruit of our eugenics plan, were being born around that time. My daughter made suggestions to increase the mother's comfort and help supervise their births. Within the year, a team of her contemporaries was assisting her with this. So she's essentially the midwife. They're effectively cherubs. The next stage in the gradual apotheosis of the human race was to let human volunteers receive a version of Gargunza's process, growing them alternate superhuman bodies of their own. Unleash your superhuman potential, so people are basically just window shopping for whichever superhuman body they wish to inhabit. Now everyone could be a god. No one need let feelings of inferiority put barriers between themselves and those who were as deities. No one at all. Hi. Meaning his wife. That's a nice ending. And so you see, this solves everything. You could have a superhuman body too. You could be Mrs. Miracle. Well, I mean, yes, if you like. I mean, you wouldn't feel out of things anymore. You could be with me and Winter and Miracle Monroe. Perhaps I could take the baby for a fly around the park while you two were screwing in Fleet Street. Oh, Liz, look. I mean, there's no need to be jealous of Avril. We've gone beyond possessiveness and jealousy. When you're like us, you'll understand. There's a waiting list for conversions, but I can move you to the top of it. Get out. Liz, look. Come on. You don't understand what you're turning down. And you've forgotten what you're asking me to give up. Just get out, and please don't come here anymore. Elizabeth Moran, nee Sullivan, my wife, the mother of my child. I've not seen her since. So she refused to give up her dignity and her humanity for superhuman superficiality, I suppose. So, not a happy ending. Of course, our program did not lack for volunteers, though our selection process was severe, accepting only those who we thought could use their power responsibly. It made a difference to the world. There is a joke now in Johannesburg. Whereabouts on the bus does a black Superman sit? Anywhere he likes. Okay. Apartheid, I think, was still active at this point, or had just ended very soon. Ascending through the center well towards the priceless summit, I think about our superculture and its many beneficiaries. Even the wretched and despised have their allotted place. Freed from all conflicts, we have time now to explore new concepts, new frontiers, charting the space inside our minds as we once did the outer void, the pioneers drawn from the hopelessly addicted, psychonauts prepared to risk their sanity and chemical reconnaissance of new interior continents. We call them spacemen. Every child's ambition is to be one with when they're grown. Looks like Alice Cooper. I'm not sure. Some wasted rocker. No one's abandoned. Therapists help former potentates adjust to a society where power is everywhere and rank is unknown. So this is a therapy group for I don't know, dictators, Saudi oil barons. Then I ordered the soldiers to kill the rabbits, and they did. Next I ordered them to give the money, and they did that too. And when I woke, oh God, I was so aroused. George, we're honored that you have trusted us with that. Moamar, have you any comments on George's dream? Oh, okay. I'm wondering if George is George Bush the first. Muammar, obviously, Muammar Gaddafi. Both deceased now. Of course, that's not to say that we don't have problems. All across the West, there are still clusters of survivalists refusing to believe that Judgment Day did not arrive in 1985. That's inevitable. They occupy their mountain strongholds and resist our attempts to get them to rejoin society. I dread to think how many more cower in buried shelters. Then there are pan-fundamentalists, the zealots of both Christianity and the Islamic faith, who came to realize that they had much in common with each other, both endangered by the fact of gods on earth who did not side with either creed. Though they can't threaten us, they sometimes set themselves on fire, which is distressing. Maybe Moors could build an artificial heaven where we'd relocate them after death. That should please everyone. Not all our traumas are so tangible. Bates, in his awful hours of freedom that he spent before his end, made an impression, it would seem. His specter stalks among us yet, and mothers use him as a boogeyman to scare their children into rapt obedience, while heavy metal bands refer to him incessantly in lyrics and interviews, citing his influence. The lookalikes are the worst. Each time afresh they startle me. So they're a little cult of nihilists after Bates who actually dress in black jackets, black ties, walk around with that scowl. And yet these faults do not diminish our achievement. All humanity prepares to fly, dressed in their capes, gaudy plumage. A migration of exotic birds, a fluttering gorgeous cloud, restless to rise into the universe. Is this perfection then? I think so. In the antechamber of the crystal room, my ceremonial uniform awaits, hung on a peg of gold. Perfection. Not without its problems, I'll confess, but then, without them, could perfection be? Think of the tedium. A sky perpetually blue without the smallest cloud to ease monotony. A poem with no word misjudged. A diamond with no flaw. O earth, look up and see your gods at celebrations. See the things that frightened you when you were in your caves. The things you named and dedicated idols to. The things you rendered up burnt offerings to appease. See how they smile and mingle, spill their wine, mistime their jokes. Rather unusual gathering here. And they are as you, and in their great mercy have decreed that you should be as they. O earth, look up. Look up beyond the centuries' horizons, where the lights of the millennium to come already stain the skies with colors strange and new. Look up, and we have repealed the laws of gravity, torn off the ceiling of the world that was so very low. The skies are yours. New beaches made of cirrus cloud, new valleys made of stratocumulus. Lift up your heads. You were not made to gaze at gutters, mud, and puddles all your lives, but have not dared to raise your sights in case the thing you long for was not there. Look up and see it now. The shape that haunted human dreams and legends since they first peered from the jungles long ago and wondered what might dwell upon those blue and distant hills, upon those mountains here. O earth, look up. And this is their sort of new Mount Olympus for which everyone can look up to, aspire to, instead of looking down at the puddles of mud. You've got to wonder what the script will look like when Alan Moore described this. And later, when the party's done, I go outside to walk alone through Asa Chorn's Memorial Park, where specters glide and anaerobic blossoms thrive, here on the rim of space. It's been 5 years since my rebirth. I come here quite a lot these days. Sometimes I think of Liz. Sometimes I wonder why she turned down my offer. Wonder why anyone should not wish to be perfect in a perfect world. Sometimes I wonder why that bothers me, and sometimes I just wonder. Yeah, the perfect world is not for everyone, that's for sure. There's something ominous about it, but it's also somewhat hard to criticize their decisions. Miracleman Book 3, story by Alan Moore, art by John Toleben, with special thanks to Tom Yates, who would also contribute greatly to Swamp Thing. Color art by Steve Oliff. And that's it. That is the end, my friends. Miracleman behind the scenes, the original cover art. Not the best cover for number 16 from 1989. Some concept art, and there you see the layout, the capstone till then, profundities aside. Quite well, these are the, obviously the captions. There was a lot of verbiage in this issue particularly, so it's a lot of reading for 2 issues, and that's quite beautiful, beautifully drawn. All the original pencils, quite tight. So that is the end of the journey with Miracleman. There is the all-new Miracleman annual with Grant Morrison, Joe Quesada, Eisenhoff, Peter Milligan, Mike Allred, Laura Allred. Might read that another time. Going to leave it for another day. That is officially the end of the Miracleman saga by Alan Moore. Thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the long wait. I hope my reading wasn't too awful. I'm a little out of practice and got a little bit of a cotton mouth reading all those words. But thanks so much for listening. Please like, comment, continue to subscribe, hit the notification bell, because I don't put out episodes very often, so it helps to know when they come out so you don't just lose me completely from your queue. And that's it for now for God Loves Comics. Satanico signing off. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.